Hey everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be walking you through a professional woodworker's take on the Deku Shield from Ocarina of Time. For materials, we're obviously going with solid wood here. A few different species though. Ash for the lighter inside of the shield, walnut for the face, which I always imagined to be more or less a piece of bark, and my secret ingredient, bloodwood. I'll come back to this one later. Like every other project in my shop, this one starts on the jointer, to square up a couple of faces so that moving forward we know we have a perfect reference edge. Then it's over to the bandsaw, where I'm shaving off a thin little strip from the larger piece. Then I take that larger piece back to the jointer to resurface the face, and repeat. This is called resawing, and I'm doing it so I waste as little wood as possible. Then take those strips and get them as thin as possible on the planer. Mine bottoms out at 1/8 of an inch, so that's what I'm going with. I've seen some absolutely incredible versions of the Deku Shield that people have made online, but it always bothers me that every replica I see seems to be flat, while in the game there's a subtle curve to it. I'm going to try and solve this by doing something called a bent ply lamination, which is effectively the process of building my own plywood from scratch. Plywood is made up of a bunch of thin layers that, unlike thicker wood, are bendy and malleable. So by turning our solid wood into these little strips, we're going to be able to bend them into shape when we glue them together into their final thickness. Speaking of which, let's assemble our finished plies. Perfect. Before a glue up, I like to mark my pieces with a triangle so that in the heat of the moment, I don't forget what goes where. Come on, I couldn't resist. Alright, I think we're ready for some glue. The trick to keeping things nice and flat while we glue these pieces together is to use cauls. The wood is going to get pressed between these while the glue is drying, so they don't bend from the clamping pressure. We want them to bend, just not yet. A few clamps on there and we're good to go. Once that glue dries, you've got yourself a beautiful ply of 1/8 inch walnut. Then do it again with the ash till you've got enough thickness for the whole shield. I ended up with 5 sheets total, coming in at a finished thickness of, you guessed it, 5/8. Now for that bloodwood. I wanted to be able to carve out the shield symbol and reveal redwood underneath, so I made up a sneaky hidden bloodwood ply. It's got an ash border so that from the sides it'll look normal, and you'll only be able to see the red from the front. So I know that looked really fast and easy, cause editing, but the resawing process is super long when you have a tiny little bandsaw like I do, and that actually took days of work to pull off. So hey, if you appreciate the effort, maybe go ahead and drop the video a like, or better yet, subscribe to the channel. Or don't, it's cool, I'm not your mom, you do whatever you want. Love you all the same. Now we've got to figure out that curve. To accomplish this, I'm going to make a form to press the plywood in as it cures. I'm using 3/4 inch melamine for this, exclusively because I had a ton of it lying around, and that is as good a reason as any. To get the right curvature, I'm setting my table saw at an angle and then cutting precisely measured strips of melamine. I have to get these angles just right if I want the final shape to turn out the way I want. Then it's tilt, measure, cut, on repeat till I've got all the pieces I need. For those of you who I'm sure are wondering, doesn't this seem like an absurd amount of work just to add a tiny, extra level of authenticity to something that debatably doesn't need to exist in the first place? Yeah. I'm just attaching the strips to the base with wood screws, nothing fancy. Fun little editor's note, this is clearly the part in the process where I start to lose my mind, because in the raw audio of this footage, you can hear me cackling to myself about how building this form wasn't actually a waste of time, because now I'm going to be able to mass produce these puppies and sell them for 40 rupees a pop. And no, you can't hear it, that recording dies with me. Sorry, back to business. I'm covering both halves of the form in packing tape so that it doesn't get glued to the wood when we press it later on. Normally for something like this, you'd want to use an industrial hydraulic press so that you can get nice, strong, even clamping pressure. But I don't have one of those. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. There is a lot of glue involved in a process like this, so we're going to have to bring out the big guns. You've only got about 10 minutes to get a piece fully glued and clamped up after starting the process, so glue ups are stressful on the best of days. And we've got a ton of ground to cover here, so I've got to work fast. That's why I went for a brush in lieu of fingers. Honestly, a foam roller would be even better here. I'm applying glue to both sides of the inner plies. Given our, makeshift clamping situation, I'm not taking any chances here. Once everything's glued, you're going to want to make sure everything's lined up neat and tidy, and then tape the plies in place so they don't slide around in the form. I'd recommend taking an extra minute here to make sure you have the right side facing down. No, that didn't happen to me, but it would be tragic. It's now or never. Grab as many clamps as your sweet little fingers can find and go absolutely nuts. The more the better. Whew, done. Alright, let's take these clamps off and see what we got. Moment of truth. Hey, that's a curve! It worked, look at that. So, I just had an idea as to how to make the end product here even cooler and more authentic than I had ever intended. Small caveat, it requires a pivot, a slight pivot, in that I have to start the entire project over from scratch, but don't let that scare you. It's gonna be so much faster this time. So we've already got the form made. We've already done most of the work. It's gonna be a breeze this time. Oh geez, let's do it. Let's get to work. Now I get to redo literally everything I just did, minus the walnut. Ash and bloodwood only. Now just do the exact same glue up, and then put it in the exact same form, and we're good as new. It's like nothing ever happened. And here is the reason that was all worth it. Wow, nature. As soon as I took that last version out of the clamps, I had a revelation. Why go halfway and try to make something look like bark when bark is right there? Before I attach this stuff, I'm gonna lay out the shield's final shape, because drawing straight lines on tree bark sounds like an absolute nightmare. Actually, come to think of it, working with tree bark in general sounds like a nightmare, so I'm gonna wait until the very last minute to glue it on. That means cutting it out and getting it down to its final shape with it still in its naked form. There's this great phase in every project where it all starts to come together, and we're getting there. The edges of the shield should taper in a bit, and at this scale, I like doing that sort of work with an orbital sander. It takes a while, admittedly, but I find it gives me a lot of control, so it's a fair trade-off. Alright, finally time to attach that bark. It's back to the old form here, and just regular wood glue. Nothing special about it. The key here is to gently lay the bark down on top of the shield and then channel every ounce of your panini press skills to lower the top of the form down without breaking or moving anything. A few hours later, after some time in the clamps, we're left with this. At this point, I gave it a quick once over on the bandsaw just to get it down to some slightly more workable dimensions. Nothing finished here. Then I use a combination of chisels, pliers, and my bare hands to rip the bark apart in a natural looking way. Like it was just ripped off the side of the tree by some little kokery shield maker. I gotta say, as a professional woodworker who lives almost exclusively in the realm of straight cuts and precise measurements, this process was strangely cathartic. Now it's time to make that symbol. Normally I'd just sketch it out on the shield's surface, but again, given the whole drawing on bark situation, I'm gonna use a template instead. I'm cutting this out on a spare piece of MDF just so I don't scratch up my work surface too badly. Once I get the template lined up right where I want it, I'm taping it in place so it doesn't move around on me. Then it's finally time to bust out the chisels. I'm going around the outside of the template and marking the edges. Normally you'd need a mallet to do this kind of thing, but bark is nice and soft, so a firm push is all you need. Take that template off, and this is where the real fun starts. This was the point of the bloodwood, and this was the point of everything. Remember when I said there's that moment when it all comes together? That's right now. Alright, last step. Couple of handles. We're gonna make these out of a couple pieces of ash. One for the grip, and one for the forearm. Look, if it were up to me, I'd probably make these out of leather, but this decision was set in stone in 1998. I don't get to pick and choose which parts I recreate faithfully and which ones I change. I'm keeping things really simple here. Cut out the shape on the bandsaw and then clean it up on the belt sander. Easy peasy. Maybe a little extra sandpaper action in there if you need it. I'm going to use dowels to attach these, so I need to drill some holes in both the handles and the shield itself. I definitely don't want to accidentally punch all the way through, so I like to put a piece of tape on the drill bit as a flag so I know I've hit the right depth. There's no real secret to where I'm placing these handles, it's just whatever looks and feels right. I'm not going to be able to get much clamping pressure on these handles, and I want a nice strong bond, so I'm going to use 2-part epoxy here. Once this stuff fully cures, it's pretty much indestructible. Except maybe some fire from Death Mountain. That might do it. Gravity's doing all the work here, so once the handles are in place, all we have to do is wait. I think we're done. Well guys, that's a Deku Shield. This turned out fantastic. I'm so glad I decided to pivot. I know that took twice as long as it should have and twice the materials, but how worth it is this? That's real bark. It's a good lesson too, I think. I mean, sometimes your best ideas don't happen until you're in the creative trenches, you know? Waist deep in that creative process, I'm sorry. Anyway, I'm rambling. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, hit the thing, do the thing, you know what to do, I don't have to tell you. All right, now that I got this shield, I can finally leave the forest. Maybe meet the Great Deku Tree. Sorry, what? I need a what?